Got an overlay. All right, we call into order the Strategic Planning Committee meeting of Monday, August the 5th, 2013. Invocation will be given by Councilman Johnson and the pledge to follow.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for your bringing everybody here tonight safely. Please give us the wisdom and the guidance to make decisions for the parish and betterment of the people that live here. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call. Everyone's here. Ms. Cazzo, except for Ms. Cazzo, she's in traffic right now on I-10. She called a while ago and probably won't make it in time for the meeting. So if she does, hopefully so. Public comment period. Anyone wishing to comment on an agenda item will fill out a form and be allowed to discuss any agenda item. Additions to the agenda. We had a couple of things that were asked by councilmen to be put on at the end of last week, and council secretaries were out at a conference, and so we couldn't get that on, so we wanted to be able to put a couple of things on the agenda.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
in reference to the items you referred to, there were two. One is the personal use of the Ascension Parish iPads that were issued to all parish councilmen back in, pre-October last year, 2012. And the other is the issue of reimbursement for internet and smartphone usage for government businesses. We've talked about it, and if we put these on the agenda, we'll discuss it, I'm sure, in detail. But our offices, of course, are our cars, our man caves, and so forth, versus we don't have office space, but we do a lot of the business using our phones as well as using the internet. So I'd like to make a motion that we can do it separately, or that both of these items be placed on the agenda.
Well, no, that's going to be part of the same agenda item.
Okay,
It's
we'll
part
do it
of,
as a single item.
part of reimbursement and use.
I'll make a second on the reimbursement.
Okay. And the motion is to discuss reimbursement policy for the council and iPad use, because there's nothing that completely covers that. Any opposition to that being added to the agenda? If so, that'll be on 5A. And then the second thing was discuss the limitations for fill on the houses in the floodplain. We want to bring that out for beginning discussions on.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Motion by Councilman Johnson, second by Councilman Satterley. Any objections? None being had. That will be listed as 5B. Okay, number 4, resolution authorizing the Parish of Ascension to administer an adjudicated property program. Lindsay Manda. Lindsay?
The agreement in your packet is an agreement between Ascension Parish and the other 24 property taxing entities in the parish, and would allow the governing authority to sell property that has been adjudicated to the parish for non-payment of property taxes.
Okay. And Lindsay, can you give us a little background so that people that are not familiar with this can get an idea about what we're talking about?
Sure. Initially, actually dating back to 2001, the parish attempted to start this program. The legislature passed a law that allowed parishes to sell property that had been adjudicated to the state for non-payment of taxes. So they vested that authority in the parish, and the parish has a responsibility of getting the other entities. And if you look at your agreement, you can see there are 24 other property taxing entities that need to agree and sign off on this agreement. But once that is done, you all will have the authority to sell these parcels. And I believe we have a list, and Parish President, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's over 300 parcels to date.
Yes, and this is something that just to let people know, something that just most other parishes are doing. And as we continue to get these situation arise, just to let somebody know, adjudicated property is, the biggest problem is you have a property that most of them are in a family, and they might have 100 heirs, and the property is a small property, and people over the years, for various reasons, has put liens on it, and no one wants to come forward and do that, and so you're getting abandoned property, and it's becoming a source of blight, and so most other parishes have taken this step to do it. Just to let people know, this is the beginning. It has to go through City Gonzales, Sorrento, Donaldsonville, all of the drainage districts, levy boards, council on aging, all of the taxing agencies has to sign off on this to agree. So this is the beginning of a process. Parish President?
And each one of those entities are going to have to share in the cost of administrating this program, because as you all well know, we only receive 2 mills in property taxes. The big beneficiaries are going to be, of course, the school board and sheriff's office and a couple other entities. So we'll administer it. And Lindsay, what sort of fee are we going to be receiving?
It's a 1/3.
1/3. So, but what it does, it takes some of this property, put it back into the economy, and hopefully, it becomes not a blighted property, and it becomes a property that we really have to upkeep on it at this particular time. So, what I'm saying, this should save us money, and also allow this property to come back, and also give the other entities a way of collecting some of the taxes that are owed to them. So it's a good all around. Oak Kent had talked about this for quite a few years, and we finally got to a point where we got everybody to at least come to the table. In 2001, the other entities didn't want to share in the cost, but now I'm not sure if they're all going to do it, but the big players seem to want to get into the game now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my question. If we had had any conversations with the rest of them, see if they were interested. So it sounds like we have. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll make them.
And one of the things, that just for background, I'm familiar with what Jefferson is doing and a few other ones, and they are moving forward. Different groups are moving forward with doing the background information that needs to be a tremendous amount of research and everything that needs to be done to bring these properties up to get all the information necessary to get to that point. And then then a number of them, the threat of being put on auction, a number of people go ahead and pay off the taxes and bring it off the adjudicated properties, and then the other ones that had no interest in doing anything with it, it becomes auctions and it goes back into commerce. So it's a win-win for everybody involved in at that point. So it's working in other places. This is not something that we're just inventing over here.
Not all 300 are going to come up at one time. We're probably going to be doing 5 to 6 a year, and we're going to start with the biggest parcels and ones we think would bring the most value back, that owe the most taxes. So.
I'll make a motion to move that forward.
Motion by Mr. Johnson to move it forward to the council in the next council meeting, second by Mr. Lambert. Any further discussion, questions, comments? None being, any objections? None being, that motion is passed. Jessica, please send that to, the council. And Ms. Manda, thank you very much for your research on this. Hopefully we'll get some more. 5A, I'm sorry, number 5, discussion of grass cutting on the East Bank. Councilwoman Terry Cazzo, this is something that she was wanting to bring forward, and she's not able to make it. Benny, for discussion real quick.
Yeah, I know we had some conversations. I had some conversation with Councilwoman Casso and a couple others, and since we did the overlay on the West Bank, thought process was we had a few issues that we could not resolve on the East Bank because of either not in a subdivision or some other issues that prevented it from getting taken care of. So The concept was to potentially do the same thing on this side with either an overlay or just basically include everything that's outside of subdivisions, and as well as whatever the other considerations that we had on the West Bank, to make sure that we're not interfering with any farm property or pastures that have livestock and those type of things in it. So that was kind of where my understanding was, the intent that she wanted to do with that. So I don't know if anybody's got any comments or questions on that, and what we would need to do to move that one forward, if she had an overlay in mind already, or if we just wanted to,
Right now, we have passed the overlay concept, which is being done. Basically, it's a model. Councilman Joseph in District 1 has a number of areas that are that. It's set up, though, that if a councilman wishes to propose certain areas for an overlay in their district, you can bring it before this body and then move it forward to the council and get the overlay to be changed and updated. So that's all it would take to get someone's area in their district to be under the same rules and regulations that we would have right now in the grass cutting overlay. So it's purely something that if you work with with Lance and them, you know, and bring it before us and get the process started.
And you can do it district by district.
Yes.
yeah, I know, I think the concept was maybe to see if there was any interest in doing it, well, on the entire east side, or make it a parish-wide thing, as opposed to doing district by district. See if anybody might have had any quorums about it, or if there were some specific areas within the districts. I know you get in a couple of the areas that you guys have, it's pretty far out there, either in the swamps or in the rural areas. You may not want to include any of those in it, but basically doing it by the areas that just take the concept of what we did with the West Bank and move it over to the entirety of the East Bank.
And just to let everyone know, the entire West Bank is not under that. There was areas that were picked out that used to be considered to be
Communities, yeah.
older communities and everything, and that didn't fall under subdivision regulations. And so because of that, people had expectations that the property would be kept up. And
Right.
so that's why those were done. So it can be something, I would personally feel better about each councilman handling, because of the differences. There's such wide-ranging differences in each council district. You have some that are very dense and populated, and some of them that are very sparsely populated. So I'd feel more comfortable with each councilman signing off on the areas that they would wish to have
Okay.
and bringing it forward. So we're not holding anyone back from doing any of that.
All right.
Sounds great,
Anything
Mr. Chairman.
Okay. With that, we'll leave that on the agenda for next meeting, Jessica, and Ms. Caswell has done more work on it and research, and we'll bring it forward. Anyone wishing, any councilman, please spread the word. Any councilman wishing to have part of that overlay in their district, get with administration, and we'll look at it and bring it forward with a map. 5A, discuss reimbursement policies for council and iPad use. Councilman Satterley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. From an historical nature, so that everyone knows, what this stems from is that we were issued as parish council members, each and every one of us, iPads, and that was a month or two, I guess, before last October 2012. After getting the iPad, myself personally, it dawned on me that we may have some potential problems if we were to be using this iPad for things other than the government use inappropriately and so forth. So I checked with IT, specifically Brandon O'Day, and asked for his counsel. He responded in an email that's only 2 sentences long, so I wish to read it into the record so you can see what he thought of what I thought of it being a problem. He writes, October 18, 2012, Doc, allowing, quote, limited, unquote, personal use of government-owned equipment appears to be widely adopted. And he is implying this in terms of federal, state, and other statutes that exist, even at local parish levels. This type of policy, however, leaves the door wide open for interpretation, as does, and this is his opinion, our own policy on this. Speaking of our policy, I'm assuming our policy in the personnel policy manual of the parish only applies to parish employees. I don't think, although I may be wrong, that the policy manual applies to you guys. And that's not a question I want to answer or anything. I'd leave that up to legal counsel. But nonetheless, I think it's probably important that we go ahead and define this. Now, the whole idea of getting the iPads, everyone will remember, was to reduce the tons of paperwork. And I got to tell you, in my own man cave, I and my wife are very appreciative of that. The parish council, of course, the finance committee, and others have put the minutes, the agendas, the voluminous packet materials, et cetera, on these iPads, and we all have them here tonight. We'll be using them in the next meetings and so forth, and that's very important. In so doing, the parish has paid monthly, since the instigation of the program, the, quote, bills for each councilman's iPad to provide those services to save the money, and I honestly believe it saves a whole lot more money to do that than to continue to kill a tree, so to speak, and keep up with the paper. But this still does not address what would be appropriate in terms of personal use and what would not. And since most of these government things that Brandon O'Day sent me, and Councilman, it's in your packet material here tonight in hard form, no pun intended, but he supplied 2 examples from the Department of Justice and another one from the Department of Interior. And I've looked beyond Mr. O'Day's research, and you can easily find this for agriculture, education, Homeland Security, Armed Services, et cetera, and all the different government agencies have, quote, these guidelines as to what's acceptable and what's not. So I realize tonight we're looking to begin a discussion on this, and I thank the chairman for adding it to the agenda so that we could do that. I'm the one that's been wanting to do this for a while now, and I think it's important that that we get something in writing. So by the way, it not only clarifies what's acceptable or what's not. I think it uses the device even better, because let's face it, we're not using them 24 hours, 7 days a week just for these committee meetings and the parish council meetings that we attend. In fact, as we segue in a minute into the reimbursement issue, all the government publications I read say that what you got to understand, what started all this is that not just the instigation of smartphones and the internet, till we could have iPads and so forth, and telephones that we carry with us, but a lot of government employees do not have set offices, particularly elected officials at a local level. Our offices are, as I indicated earlier, our man caves. Myself personally, I do a lot of work out of my own personal vehicle. Whether you're called out to walk a ditch and look at a drainage issue or whatever the case may be. So to me, it would be important to define when you're not doing that, what can you use this iPad for otherwise? And I think the guidelines, again, of the DOJ and the DOI and others that we can use maybe going forward would be important in doing that. And then what would be a fair way to handle reimbursement? On that subject, when I was first elected councilman, so that goes back a full 18 months, we were given in an orientation meeting a paper, which all councilmen, you have that in front of you again tonight, as to what the policies of the parish were on your salary, obviously, what kind of per diems you get when you attend a drainage board meeting, paper, ink, cartridges, travel, all that kind of stuff, which are all pretty well defined. There is an issue, however, with the use of cell phones. Seems like there isn't when the parish issues you one, but again, if you bought your own smartphone and you have your own computer in your house and so forth, can we and should we be reimbursed for the use of those? My personal opinion is yes, but it should be done on a limited basis relative to a percentage of how much you would use those items, because obviously you would still be using your. I can't cause anybody, whether they're government related or personal, to call me or not call me on a phone. So a percentage, I would think, is what most people I'm see doing, might be the way to handle that. So much percent of the phone could be charged, so to speak, to the parish for reimbursement, and so much of your home computer use, just like paper and ink cartridges and so forth for your computer. And the final thing I want to leave before we open this discussion up everyone with is this. Clearly, the IRS is happy with this type of approach because, and I talked to my CPA about it, I filed my taxes late this year, just last week, brought them to him, and he indicated, yes, absolutely, that if you were not receiving any reimbursement, even a proportion of, for your cell phone or home computer use for government activities, then you could literally deduct a room in your house or a proportion of it, your utilities to do the same, gasoline for your car, wear and tear in your car, when you go out to see things, et cetera. I'm not asking for any of that. I'm asking for just a simple reimbursement here tonight for a certain percentage of our personal cell phone and home office computers. I'm not asking the parish to buy me a computer. I'm not asking the parish to buy me a smartphone, but to participate a little bit in the sharing of the cost for the internet service that we email all our constituents with all the time, or amongst each other and so forth and so on. Even when we use our ap.gov address, it comes to your house. So I'll hush up there and wait to hear what some of my fellow councilmen have to say.
Okay. And there's some information that you have there from Department of Justice and Department of Interior Ethics Office about what they have policies for and what can be used and what can't be used. And what we're looking for is a policy, I think, established. Right now, correct me if I'm wrong, Parish President, do we have an established policy?
Home Rule Charter allows you, and I have her go and get a copy of it so you can read directly from it. Never, since the Home Rule Charter became law, not one council has ever adopted a system of reimbursement. The charter allows you to do so. It doesn't specify what, as long as it allows you to perform your duty. And I'll read it if you give me a second.
Yes, sir.
I'll get it and I'll read it directly.
Just a
That's the
quick,
same thing exactly for parish president. It's kind of the same situation. Compensation. It's B on C7. Says the governing authority by ordinance may adopt a system of reimbursement upon presentation of properly documented receipts of reasonable expenses necessary to the performance of the official duties of the governing authority and in compliance with state law. So basically, you asked the question about being an employee. You're not an employee, you're not a full-time employee. But the charter gives you the authority to adopt it. If you were to say that you wanted to pay 1/3 of your phone bill, if you brought a receipt or whatever you adopted, or you could pay 100% of your phone bill, as long as it you can show that you're using it in your duties. That would be okay. Nobody's ever done that before. They've adopted certain things for travel, but ever since the charter was instituted in 1994, not one council has ever introduced an ordinance to reimburse these certain ones that you want to call back. So, Doc, I would say that it is perfectly legal for you to do so according to the charter, but the key in this thing, it says upon properly documented receipts. So it's okay if you want to pay part of your bills or your internet bill or whatever you think is necessary, or this council deems necessary as in performance of your duty. So it's not, I think this is the law, and it's not inconsistent with state law. So
But we have to establish a policy by ordinance, right?
by ordinance.
Right.
It's got to be by
And
ordinance.
that's what hasn't happened.
And you have to have properly documented receipts.
Right.
So it doesn't matter if whatever you want to do, as long as that's the charter, that's the law.
And I think that's kind of what brought this up.
Right.
It was assumed years ago that people would get reimbursed on different things, and they were, and so then they found out that we had never passed an ordinance. And
It's got to be done by ordinance.
And so it was a policy that was passed, but it was never an ordinance. And so through administration and legal, it brought to our attention, and at that point, started looking into it. In fact, we started looking into it because Doc had turned in some documentation, and we found out we couldn't get reimbursed on it. So that's where we are right now. I would like to, we'll ask for any other comments, but this is just for discussion. I'd like to bring things back. We can meet individually and try to come up with some wishes by the different councilmen about how we want to proceed on this. Yes, Mr. Johnson.
Dan, I appreciate you bringing this information forward. I think from what I see here and the information you provided, seems to be pretty common sense stuff as far as the policies that they have there, and would be interested in seeing maybe a subcommittee or something formed to come up with a recommendation as far as a policy and reimbursement schedule, so forth, for this stuff that you have here, and bring it back to us for consideration. I know we've had some conversations in the past about it, just never has anybody taken the time to really do the research and run with it and come up with some recommendations. So if anybody has the time to do that, I would certainly be open to discussion and seeing what we have there.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, and I'd also be in favor of that, but I would like to make sure we have at least 3 or 5-person committee, and we need someone from finance also to be in this, just to see what, even with the, I see here with the travel, the travel and, also, the cell phone, how they distinguish, personal use and, government business. We need to know what the, what minutes or different
Okay.
things that we allowed on this, so we'll know not to go over or stay within our means with it.
There's been some discussion. What we'll do is, we'll appoint 3 people, and I'll appoint 3 people, and after discussion with y'all and Councilman Lohr, and then we'll talk with Parish President and get somebody from accounting and secretary to
Legal?
and legal to make sure that we have everything the way it's supposed to be. So,
Sounds good.
I think we had worked on this 5 years ago, and they have some paperwork that's been done. Just never did materialize and never did come to a vote. So, I don't think that, you can look at what we did back then and see what you think. And
we're probably, Parish President, if we could, probably next Monday morning, if we could, we'll see about what time people are available to have a meeting and see if we can come up with something from there. Okay, I'll let you guys know where we can go from there. I know Councilman Cazzo was interested in this. I know she's going to want to be involved in discussions also. Okay. Any further comments? Okay, moving on to 5B, discuss limitations for fill on the houses in floodplain. This has been brought up, our chairman, Mr. Lohr. Chris, do you want to bring some background here, and we'll have some more discussion?
Sure. Thank you, Kent. Just had a conversation recently with our planning director, Mr. Compton, with regards to some houses and trailers that are on some very large ant mounds. It's kind of a nickname that people give them, but very large mounds of dirt that people, surrounding neighbors and everything, are concerned with some drainage impact. And I asked Mr. Compton where they had left off, because I thought he had mentioned it or had brought it to the Planning Commission, but basically he asked for a recommendation from this body, the Strategic Planning Committee, to charge him to go back to the Planning Commission and work with them on, what the right level is. Nobody knows if it's 18 inches, 24 inches, 36 inches, whatever, before at some point maybe you have piers or what have you, or, what the surrounding issues are. Is it just residential? Is it, are there other areas or not? But basically, it's just a fairly complicated issue. But no one's doing anything about it, so we just kind of need to get that ball rolling again, and just asking for this body to consider sending that to him and the Planning Commission to start working on that.
Yes, Parish President?
years ago, we had passed an ordinance, I think, in the 90s, basically, that said that you had to go 1 foot above the floodplain at that time. Basically, what that does, and I don't know if this is the same situation. Okay.
That's the elevation.
Yeah.
of the housing requirement, which most parishes adopted. What we're talking
Because you don't
about
want
here
to fool with that
is
because
that if a person has a required elevation that's happened to be 5 feet off of the natural ground, and they haul in 5 feet of dirt, and what has been happening, and I know it's happened in my district on a number of occasions, is this mound of dirt, as it gradually goes to the edge of their property. And so all of the drainage ends up going into the neighbor's property. That's one big problem that has been a concern for people, and it's pretty obvious when you see it. You know, you don't know, you're not sure how to describe the problem, but when you see it, you know it's a problem. And then the other thing is that expected, I know some questions by engineers and other parishes and everything has discussed this, is that over time, if you build up just 5 or 6 feet of fill under a house without any containment or anything like that, is that these houses are subject to subsidence and everything, and it just becomes a question then, since we made the requirements, you know, what kind of liability and whatever we have. So, you know, we need to take a look at it and see what direction we want to go in, or if we want to do anything about it. But there's a number of options, from allowing people to build up so much and then require piers or something like that. And nowadays, with the advancement in technology that people can, you're seeing, especially other parishes, are building off the ground, and they're doing this successfully and reasonable costs. And the increases in insulation and everything have been such to a point that people can do this, and people are learning how to do it. So just to let people know, in Ascension Parish, 126 miles from the coast, we have many areas that are 0 to 4 feet above sea level, and we have many areas that that we have tidal ranges on the bayous that's in front of your house. So it's a real issue. Again, Parish
I
President.
think a simple solution would be that if you had to build up more than X amount of feet, whether that be 2 feet, then you couldn't bring in fill. You'd have to just put it on pilings. That could be what the ordinance reads. You give it a reasonable amount that you could bring in fill, and if it goes above that, then you could require that they have to put it up on piers, and that makes it simple.
That's pretty much what we're talking about, but we have to come to a consensus of what that elevation would be, what that height would be. And so that's where we need to do some research and discussions, and maybe take a little road trip and make some examples and see what, you know, what we want and what not want.
I think what Councilman Lohr is looking for is basically to have planning and zoning do that research for us. Basically, what they're looking for from us is a recommendation saying, yeah, we're interested in making that kind of a commitment and a change to our planning and zoning ordinances, which I am. I think it's a smart move to make, because we're going around, especially maybe lot by lot, basically changing what our floodplain looks like. Especially, I've been in some areas where I've seen houses built up 7, 8 feet. And so, I mean, that's putting a lot of water on the neighbor's property very quickly and turning their yards into basically having a lot of saturation issues, as well as actually putting water in people's houses potentially, depending on the type of rainfall. So I'd like to make a recommendation that we ask planning and zoning to go forward with the research and come up with a recommendation back to the council for that.
We can't do that at this meeting because we have this on just for discussion.
Okay.
And we can't make any recommendations, but I would like people to do some discussions. And that was recommended before. However, the problem was the recommendation coming from planning to the planning and zoning was an elevation such that people wasn't willing to, and councilmen wasn't willing to accept. So they need to kind of get an idea on feedback as what the councilmen are willing to go out and pass, and not them go through this without without expectations of the council going along with them. So please do your research and have some discussions with planning and Ricky Compton and see what, you know, you would like to have in your areas. And we'll take this up for something to vote on a recommendation next meeting. Yes, Ms. Cazzo, we want to welcome you. You came
Thank
in
you.
the last discussion, and if We have about 2 minutes. We had a short discussion on the grass cutting on number 5.
Yes, sir.
It was discussed about using what we had piloted on the west bank to come to the east bank, and we were waiting to hear from you for any further things, but basically, people were looking forward to implementing some of the overlays on the east bank, and we asked that people bring back specifics at the next meeting,
Okay, thank you.
if
That's
that would be
sufficient.
fine. Okay. With that,
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
motion by Mr. Johnson, second by Mr. Lambert. This meeting is adjourned.